Hey, good morning, everyone. How are you today? It's Monday. It's time for our memory verse. Hey, I want to jump right into the memory verse because in order to really give the story, I got to give quite a bit of background information. So, with that being said, hey, this week our character trait for the Christian is being decisive. Being decisive means making a decision and following through on the decision that you make. And we're coming from Joshua this week, chapter 24, verses 14 and 15. And I'm going to go ahead and get right into them. And the memory verse goes like this. It says, "So fear the Lord and serve him wholeheartedly. Put away forever the idols your ancestors worshipped when they lived beyond the Euphrates and in Egypt. Serve the Lord alone. But if you refuse to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. Would you prefer the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates? Or will it be the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live? But as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord." All right, so before I get into what's going on here and trying to break it down for us, just full disclosure, the book of Joshua is one of my favorite books of the Bible. Uh, uh, I could relate so well to the story of Joshua and what he was going through. And for us to really fully understand what's going on in this memory verse, in this narrative here, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning of Joshua and just do a little remembering. For those of us who remember, Joshua is the one who actually leads the people of Israel into the promised land from the desert. And the reason why this happened is because when they got to the edge of the promised land, Moses sent Joshua and a team of spies into the promised land to scope it out, to spy it out, and see the best plan of attack for entering into the promised land. Joshua and Caleb came back, and they came back with a positive report. The others of the spy contingent, I think it was 8 of them. 8 of them out of the 10 total, 8 of them came back and said the land was filled with giants. They're going to kill us. They're going to wipe us out. There's no way God promised us this land, and we can't do it. So what happened is the people of Israel believed the report of the 8 as opposed to the report of the 2. And so remember, last week our trait was to be courageous. The direction that we got last week, be strong and courageous, that phrase is repeated 10 times throughout the book of Joshua. And so Joshua and Caleb had to be brave when they actually went on the original spy mission and then came back and gave this report. Joshua and Caleb wanted to live, and they believed in the promise of God, that this was the promised land and that they could walk in and that God would provide for them. But unfortunately, the other 8 gave such a powerful report that most of Israel believed them. So what happened is God could not use Israel at that time, so they continued to wander the desert until finally the last of that generation died off, and then Joshua ascended up to leadership, and then Joshua led the people into the promised land. When they were led into the promised land, yes, they did have to face some of these giants, but the Lord went before them and delivered the promised land into their hands. And so what happened after that is you have roughly 40 years that Joshua and the Israelites are in the promised land, and Caleb comes to Joshua and says, hey, at the beginning of this, God promised me a portion of this land. And so you have a division of the promised land between the tribes of Israel. And this is happening in Joshua right around right around chapters 14 and 15. And so from this point forward, the promised land is divided up. Yes, they still had to face those giants. They had to face the Amorites and the Hezatites and the Amalekites and a whole bunch of other ites that I can't get into. But before every battle, and when it was divided up, the Lord God went before all of the people of Israel and made it so that the Israelites would win the war, win the battle, and they would get the land that He had promised them. And so what happened there, just like what happens now with a lot of us, is when God blesses us and fulfills His promise, we forget that we need to continue to give God His glory and give God His praise. What was happening then is that the people of Israel were starting to believe in the ideas and believe in the gods and idols of the same enemies that they just defeated. So what was happening is they were not living up to the faithfulness and living up to the blessings that God wanted to give them. So in the beginning of the chapter that we're in, chapter 24, Joshua calls all the tribes of Israel together. He sits them down and he reminds them all, hey, remember, God went before you. He delivered you. He delivered you from the hands of all the giants. He saved you from the floods. He saved you from all the diseases that were going around. He made your harvest and your crops grow. He protected you. He gave you shelter and all these wonderful things. And so Joshua had to lay into him as the leader and says, you guys are tripping. I don't know what you're doing, and you're forgetting to give God his glory. So Joshua challenged the people of Israel right then and there to make a decision. They needed to be decisive. They needed to choose who they were going to serve. And Joshua laid it out for them. If you look into your verses, it says, who will you serve? Will you serve the gods of old that your forefathers, your grandparents, and your great-grandparents, will you serve them the way they were living out in the desert and back in Egypt when they were in slavery? Will you choose the gods and idols of the people that you live around now, being that God helped us defeat them all? Or will you remember to serve the Lord your God? And then Joshua tells them all, as for me and my house, me and my family, we're going to serve the Lord. And that is the decisiveness. That is the decisive decision that Joshua made. He decided that he was going to follow the Lord, and he was going to live with it, and no matter what came of it. And that is the challenge that he laid out to Israel. And then that is actually the challenge that we, NCS and FCS teachers and staff, we're trying to get you. We want you to make that decision. We want you to live for the Lord God. We want you to live for Jesus Christ. And we want you to be decisive in your faith and in that decision. So I will ask you right now, who will you serve? Will you serve the Lord God, or will you serve this world? It's up to us to be decisive and to make our decision. And so that what was going on in this. And then Joshua said it plainly, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So that is our story for this week. And that's it. Be decisive. We have to make our decisions, but always consider the Lord, ask the Lord for guidance, and then go from there. So that's our story for this week. You guys be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Take care of your business in the classrooms. And until next time, God bless you. Bye.